Okay, so I'll let people in as they filter in, but thank you for joining us tonight. Just a couple of ground rules before we get started. Please keep yourselves muted throughout the program. There will be a Q&A session towards the end. And as you heard, this program will be recorded and put on our website after the program. So with that, we will welcome Susan Katz, a local author to our area and a nationally and internationally published poet who has worked on a number of journals, anthologies, and literary magazines, with the publication of Limits of Light as her latest release. Welcome, Susan. Oh, I think you're muted.
Am I with you now?
There you go.
Okay. I'm so sorry about that. As many of you will be able to tell, this is a new venue for me, this virtual reading. I'm used to a person-to-person kind of event. And I honestly cannot see you. I don't know if I'm supposed to be able to or not, but I see names, but I don't see faces. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I would very much like to thank the Gunn Library for inviting me and for hosting this event this evening. I am a poet. I am, I guess, what you could call a confessional poet in general. My three previous collections and the one that's coming out in 2022 are all poems about life, loss, sorrow, personal things, I guess. And so this book, The Limits of Light, is a deviation for me in terms of writing poetry. So I wanted to quickly just tell you how it came to be. My husband and I were traveling in Italy, and we were in Rome, and we went to the Villa Borghese. And as we walked in, right there in the center hall was this magnificent statue of the Rape of Persephone by Bernini. I was mesmerized. My husband went off to see the rest of the museum, and I just stood there. I wandered around the statue, carved in stone, and you could feel his fingers digging into her flesh. You could feel the fear and terror in her face. You could see the arrogance and entitlement in his face. I really didn't know much about the story. So when we got home, one of my first trips was to the bookstore to buy some books on Greek mythology. And I read up about the Rape of Persephone and was inspired to write a poem. And so that was the first poem in the collection. But then I was fascinated by Greek mythology and kept reading and kept discovering more stories that touched me in a way that seemed to me to be telling me that these were stories that were written as guidelines, as warnings for us. And if only we had listened to them, we would be in a much better place than we are. So the book, The Limits of Light, came to be. And what I felt after I finished the poems was that the collection needed a framework. It needed a beginning and an end. And so I wrote the poem, The Gift, in the beginning, and I complete the book with the poem, The Gift, in the end. So I'd like to start tonight by reading The Gift in the beginning. 1. In the beginning, darkness was all there was. No hint of light punctured the insidious everything that was the husk of night. A single black-winged bird, Nyx, patrolled the void. Her vast wings spread into shadowless flight, and in an orgy of delight, she mated the wind. In time, she lay a single egg, suspended in emptiness. Time passed, a day, a week, eternity. And then one morning, ushered in by sun, the miracle of Eros, god of love, was born. Thus too burst forth the paradise of heaven and the promise of earth. But Eros felt a gnawing emptiness. On whom to lavish love when one is one alone? And so He willed there be a race of gods, and so there was. But being gods, they eyed each other with undisguised distrust, vied with one another for reasons not even they could name. It was as if ablation was a game. Jealous rages sent them into frenzied fits. Father swallowed son, brother dispatched brother, and the most powerful hurled the weak into the darkness of some version of incessant hell. They were vain, arrogant. Trust was stale as day-old bread. They conspired, schemed, employed every bit of strength and cunning till they named their rivals dead. Each sought in some vile way to best the other. The mightier inflicted on lesser gods horrific tasks and terrors. Then Zeus, risen to the throne of gods, perhaps in boredom or vexed by all the endless bickering, looked for a distraction, a bit of playful sport, or just a whim, as such the gods were often subject to, decided he would create man. And so it began. 2. Zeus assigned the task of making man to Prometheus, the making of animals to Epimetheus, giving them a single basket of gifts to bestow on their creations. Epimetheus completed his task first. Prometheus, done at last, looked into the basket of gifts, seeking to bestow one on man, only to find there were none left. Epimetheus had used them all. Distressed, Prometheus thought hard, aching to find something worthy of this fine day's work. Found only one thing floating on the edges of his mind, forbidden by Zeus to bestow, the gift of fire. Knowing it would liberate the great god's rage, entrusted mankind with fire. Dire consequences followed. Zeus flew into a fury, savagely condemning Prometheus to an eternity of torment. Chained to a mountainside, his liver devoured each day anew by vultures. Zeus's vengeance, but mildly appeased, devised a scheme to further punish men for a crime they had not committed, ordering another son to create a perfect woman, well beyond what beauty demands, naming her Pandora. Each of the gods bestowed on her a gift. Zeus's gift, the gift of curiosity, and a box she was instructed never to open. Then discharging her to earth, wherein but a day she found the love of young Epimetheus around her heart, and for a while life cherished her. But Zeus's gift was like the beating of a drum, the box itself silent and still, the pounding growing in her head till she thought it might burst. Her longing like an unquenched thirst, she almost thought she heard it speak to her. Open me, open me, open me. She reasoned the gifts the gods and goddesses had showered on her had been well beyond illustrious. So too, Pandora thought, must be the contents of the box, a gift from the greatest god of all. And so she heeded its call and opened it. Horrors of every kind flew out in a frenzy of freedom. Pain, sickness, envy, greed, lust burst up and out to the far corners of the world. Pandora's screams brought her husband Epimetheus to her side, and with a stalwart effort, he closed the lid and locked it shut. But Zeus's nasty play had found a hapless mark in man. Sickness brought down the weak and strong. Greed walked the streets, a hulking beast, bore even great cities to ruin. Beauty, once admired, became the bride of envy and turned hideous. Pandora sobbed at the evil she had set loose upon the heart and home of men. She wailed well in the night, and then, when tears were drained to dust, she quieted and thought she heard a small sound. She moved to stand above the box, listening. There it was, a small cry, or perhaps the scratching of fingers as they groped to find a way to freedom. But then the cry became the heartbeat of a plea. Let me out. Let me be. I am hope. So that is the beginning of the story of the gods and the story of man. Their stories are, of course, intermingled throughout Greek mythology. I thought that I would read for you the first poem that I wrote for the collection, which is The Rape of Persephone. So that's the second poem I'll be reading you tonight. The Rape of Persephone. You could not know how much less than wondrous would be the substance of your illusion as you gazed at the river fidgeting among the reeds. You could not name the longing or begin to place a face on desire. Too pure for shape, it clung to your mind like the fragrance of flowers. Hours lay strewn like petals at your feet. Browning blades of grass thrummed through your fingertips as you waited in your garden of eternal spring to learn how truth would taste on your tongue. It was too soon to know what you would spend eternity learning to forget. All that had gone before would hang like the moon in a dark sky, too cold for comfort. Terror began whole. Overripe, it seared your flesh, turning it to ash, your pores leaking sweat, your hands boning into fists, your heart beating always to rhythms of unhurried time, flailed against the hindrance of your breaking beneath his bilious grip. Daughter of dreams and gods, the wind carried your screams till they turned to a mere whispering amongst the leaves. Lifted to be launched upon his charging steeds, their iron-colored reins let loose to drag, grappling your side and thigh, his laughter slicing thin vanity's skin. Would you, if heritage allowed it, have prayed to die? And as the river Sion bowed to Pluto's passion, halved itself to swallow you whole, did you yet know the queenly title your few bright drops of virgin's blood would buy? Though legend tells us gods must never cry, your heart unlocked the prison of your grief and gave you leave to weep. Who look at you stiff in stone knows fear and sinks to troubled sleep at night, drowning in the river of your one white tear. The second poem that I wrote for this collection was one I think we're all, the story I think most of us are familiar with. It's the story of Icarus. That was a story I heard as a child in school and was always fascinated by. One of the things that I found really most interesting when I was reading and learning about mythology after my trip to Rome was that as many times as you read the story, in as many books as you read it, you will find that it's a little bit different each time. So I have to kind of put them together to come up with the version. At least that's what I did for my poem. This is the title poem of the book, The Limits of Light. How colossal was the dream, to soar skewered on shards of ageless air, a sprite, or kindred spirit to the birds. Young Icarus, you flew. You breathed the lightness of a brighter filament and cast your shadow like a god on faces gaping from below. Trapped with you in the tower by a brooding king, Daedalus invented flight from feathers and soft wax, and taught with patience how to hold your gently curving wings just so, to launch yourself, to flutter, to grip with heel and toe ledges of light. Soft boy, how much more joy did you begin to feel in clouds, horizons, and the star-encrusted canopy of night. Child of a loving father, whose hands trembled at your still pink cheeks, whose arms held all his dreams in that embrace, then set you on your flight with cautioning to cleave the middle path, for fear the river's mists would weight your wings, the sun's heat weaken wax. Past Samos and Delos and Levanthos you flew, exulting in this new delight, but we grow giddy on our dreams fulfilled. They make us merry with our own conceit. Bored by the limits of light, you broke all earthly bounds and sought the sun. Its lure, lust, and tight, you pulsed upward, driven by a sensuous sense of self, body and bone beating against arteries of air. All dreams are breakable, and few worthy of repair. What then was mirrored in your eyes as you began to feel the silent suction of wax corrupting flight, the soft fall of flesh and feathers? The swirling waters swallowed your cries, and your father's lamentations filled the space between earth and heaven. Foam cradled you coldly out of sight of loving eyes. It is the way of dreams at first, to tempt us past the promise, then shatter us at last against the lie. The next poem that I'd like to share with you, and it's kind of hard for me to figure out which poems I want to read on a particular night. But this one is also, I thought I would choose a few that I think you must be familiar with. This is the story of Medusa. And I was totally amazed when I started reading about Medusa, because I had in my head this whole vision of her and this whole version of who she was. And but then I began to read the Greek myths in different books and discovered that there was far more to the story of Medusa than I had ever known. So this poem is entitled Of Beauty Born, and it's the story of Medusa. Beyond the grim obsession with herself, vanity was vice, and beauty yours would be the price demanded, duly paid. Minerva was most lovely, and conceit ran deep. And you, Medusa, dared to vie in beauty with her, and in beauty were a fitting rival, for your face was fair and flowing like a river caught in sunlight. Splendor was your hair. How it vexed her, beauty bested, shattered into wrath. Minerva raged, and anguish filtered into darkness like a shadow floating in the black of night, blinding caution and compassion by the need to satisfy its lust and thus destroy. For goddesses, when anger aches, the cure is simple as command. And in the instant that it takes to close an eye, Minerva hurled her vengeance at you, and your hair, as soft as lips upon a lover's cheek, turned wild writhed each strand into a living serpent, rooted, twisted, hissing in a hideous dance of demons, round and round the horror of your face. Your crime was beauty, of beauty born the punishment. Innocence was sacrificial, and of you rumors grew of cruelty, monstrous evil, a repugnant thirst for blood, death, the breath of heroes flamed within their lungs at the very mention of your name. And if beneath your Gorgon's frame the blood still warmed, the heart still beat the same, no maiden now, for judgment was a curse and prophecy. And you became the image that you saw reflected in the mirror of your victim's eyes. Bound by bitterness, your eyes sucked men dry until you were surrounded by a litany of flesh and bone betrayed by your glance to stone. Outcast, outlandish, in your cave you dwelt a fiend dreaded, dreadful, and no living thing could look upon you and survive. Prompted finally by pity, do goddesses submit to such, or piety, or merely petty hate still pressed like petals between the pages of her days? Minerva lent to Perseus her shield, and bid Mercury loan him his wings. And while you slumbered, did you feign sleep? Perseus ventured swift and deep within your realm, and with your image caught upon the gleam of Minerva's shield, wielded his blade and slew the Gorgon maid. Epilogue. How hateful to you was the hand that hurt to death each outstretched heart. Medusa, in your ravaged soul, what longing, what monumental loss endured, and what must night have been for you who could no longer warm to light or love, desire in a face that held you dear? How you must have ached beneath the mass of serpents, and how cold the air about you, frosted with the breath of fear. Your glance fatally conceived? Each mind believed it so, and hardened beyond breath by what they thought they saw. Perhaps no less or more than their own image carved upon the gravestone of your eyes. Truth or lies? How could the world have known, or history record what lay beneath your gruesome glare? Medusa, did not your woman's heart welcome in the end the sword that severed you from despair? I found in reading the Greek mythology and in reading the stories that it's almost like they were a message for us. It's almost as if these stories were telling us, these are the mistakes we made, these are the things we did that you should not do, that you should kind of learn from some of the disasters that really the Greek gods not only dealt to humans, but dealt to themselves. The next poem that I'm going to read to you is called Hazard of the Heart. And it's a poem about the greatest god of all in Greek mythology, Zeus. And Zeus, like us, like each of us, has his breaking point. And this story tells of that. 1. Zeus. Monarch of the sky and thunder, Zeus. You ruled the world of gods and men, a lightning bolt your sword, hurled at will, filling the hearts of men with terror. God of them all, your birth itself was tentative. A gift of subterfuge your mother Rhea managed as she longed to hold one child she birthed at last, if only for an instant, within the aching circle of her arms. Your father Cronus zealously believed a son born of Rhea's womb would one day bring him down. Upon each birth, he took the infant from her, swallowing it whole. But you, Zeus, were meant for things beyond even that which Cronus commanded. Your mother plotted the hope of you, her very breath, your death unthinkable. Wrapping a stone in swaddling cloth, plying Cronus with coy smiles and strong red wine, she gave it to him, saying, "It was you." And in his altered state, he never knew. And you, Zeus, held but for a heartbeat in your mother's nourishing embrace, like a secret whispered in the dark, was sent to Crete, nursed by the nymph Amalthea, guarded by young warriors who clashed their weapons in mock battles to disguise your infant cries. And prophecy proved true, for you in time led the fatal insurrection that brought Cronus to his knees. It pleased you so you named yourself God of the world, bequeathing lesser kingdoms to half-brothers, Hades, the underworld, Poseidon, god of the sea. 2. But gods are only men inside their heads and hearts. And though your seed was spread at random with all the crude abandon of a storm that rapes the land, there came a day when even Zeus, great God of everything, of the heavens, of the earth, and all the space splayed between, and well beyond the stars, a day when you, Zeus, came to know the fierce finality of failure. Perhaps you loved her in the way a god may love a woman, not a goddess. But this woman, named Semele, was warm and willing. Unaware of your resplendent name, you came to her and planted in her womb your seed, a deed you'd done so many times before. But this time, something tender, like the tendrils of a summer vine brushing your cheek, filtered its way into your heart. Your wife, Hera, discovering yet another of your tiresome deceits, crafted her revenge, befriended the innocent girl pregnant with her lover's child, revealed to her your name was Zeus, great God of the world. But Semele did not believe. How could a child of man conceive the offspring of such a god as you? Next time you came heated and heady to her bed, she asked of you a boon. And here the story softens like snow beneath a midday sun. And you promised, swearing on the river Styx, to grant her anything. Love takes the heart and head to places they may never choose to go. Reveal yourself, she said. Vaunt your glory, great God Zeus. And so the wheels spun once around. This story, even for the God of gods, could not end well. And in the telling might bring to tears even the hardest heart. Bidden by Semele and a somber oath pledged, you begged her to unsay her words. But laughing playfully, believing you a too vain man, she giggled, I cannot. Show me the divinity who will father our child. And so you did. 3. Semele lay upon a lover's bed, her head tilted towards you, a soft smile alive in her eyes. And slowly you rose. You removed your cloak, letting the power of you, the grandeur of you slip out from every pore until you were more than frail Semele could grasp. No mortal man, a god indeed, as powerful as unleashed lightning, the flash of your radiance turned her in an instant to ash. The child of her womb, of your seed you saved by sewing its fetal form into your thigh. And in the course of time, Dionysius was born, half man, half god, the proof of a life you'd loved and lost to the imposing power of your unbearable flame. 4. Epilogue. Ah, Zeus, what's in a name? Everything, it seems, and nothing. You were the god of gods, he who ruled all that there was. The world spread out before your feet like carpet spun of gold. Each dawn greeted you and gave you leave to be, to do, to have. Power and passion were yours for the taking, but God or man, man or God, vulnerable to one simple truth. If one has a heart, it is susceptible to breaking. The stories of the gods have intrigued me, and I suspect there will be more poems written. I would like to read you, I think we have a little bit of time left before we're going to open it for discussion. So I thought I would read you as the, let's see where it is now. I'm just looking for it in the book. It is the story of Narcissus. And I think that's something that's a story that we've all heard. And I'm just, give me a moment here. It's called What Matters. And it's a story of Narcissus and Echo. We all know about Narcissus, and I think we've all heard the story of Echo. But what I didn't know when I started reading about it was the fact that our Narcissus and Echo, their lives were intertwined. So the story of Narcissus and Echo, the title is What Matters. 1. Narcissus. We name what's beautiful. It's just a thought. We gasp in awe as dawn escapes the fist of night and thrill to see clouds threatening rain gather on a distant hill. And yet Narcissus' beauty named you, was your path by birth and by divine design. Son of the river god Cephisus and the lovely lymph Liriope, you found your way as hunter, melting into forest shade and sunlit glade, the invigorating throb of your beauty nourishing your soul. Days came and went, stars burnished the night, sun sprayed pathways of shadows between the restless trees, and in an endless flow of moments, you thought you needed only this, you, to bring you this. 2. Echo. You never chose the path your feet would travel on. Heard like seed upon the wind to land in some unlikely place, you came one day upon a face that burned itself into the very space between your eyes and mind. You spied Narcissus. The image of him caging your heart. Such was the truth of his perfection. Only he could assuage the need that drew you to his side. Not conscious thought, but urgency, commanded that you wrap him in your arms, your face alight with what you couldn't name as love. You reached to bring him close, to know the feel and smell of him, to deliquesce into the very flesh of him, two becoming one. But one was all Narcissus knew and thought he craved. His countenance grew dark. His eyes flashed flame. He threw you from his side, crying aloud in such words and tone that they must to even the most smitten heart convey disgust. 3. Narcissus and Echo. Echo discarded, as though her touch tainted him, allowed her glance to linger on what her desiccated heart thirsted for, saying aloud the name she would never hear him speak. Echo, 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 until it was all that was left of her. Narcissus gave her not another thought, and went unburdened by even the memory of her on his way. But other eyes were watching. Nemesis, goddess of retribution and revenge, appalled by his arrogance, schemed to punish him, led him to a clear and sunlit pool, filling him with an unquenchable thirst. In lively mood, he bent to bring the water to his lips, and spied his own reflection smiling up at him. Such beauty there before him, awoke in a longing, a passion he had never known, reaching for the pale white skin with tremulous fingers, only to watch the image shatter at his touch. The truth undid him. In love with himself, he discerned it, a tuneless song, empty as hands with nothing to hold but air. Days no longer fair, nights devoid of stars brought him to despair. He had everything but what he craved, to be touched, loved and burned. Bitterness burned him into the ash of an early grave. 4. Epilogue. The gods, capricious in their gifts, gave Narcissus beauty, wondrous to behold, what all would deem the grandest prize. But words of love spoken to oneself fall like petals in an early frost. Loneliness blossoms into weeds in an unkept garden. The truth Narcissus never knew echoes like a requiem, not beauty, power, wealth, or even love matter when the only one they matter to is you. I see that we're getting a little bit close to the 45-minute mark, and I know I wanted to leave at least about 15 minutes for us to have a little bit of a conversation and to answer any questions you might have. So I'd like to finish the reading by reading the gift in the end, which is the second half of the poem I read at the beginning. Pandora, neither wicked nor unkind, designed with simple curiosity the fate of man. And though some gods might casually have pondered what the future well beyond their time, for all life has a time and then is gone, might incarnate as the thought like butterflies upon a summer breeze was there and then was not. And truth, though often what the gods and we least choose to know, reveals itself in every petty, implacable thing we do. We, like the gods, or they like we, beget our own disasters out of lust, turn happiness to grief, opportunity to dust. Zeus filled Pandora's basket with malevolence and filled her childlike heart with quiet wonder and a need to know. Though we as the god may flail and fail at this and that, and in the darkness of inevitable night grasp at straws and desperately grope for something to hold on to, the gift, so simple and so grand in scope, may yet, if cherished, see us through. The gift of hope. Thank you. And Jessica, I don't know how you want to do the reading, the conversation, but I'd love to hear from anyone who'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, at this point, we're a small enough group. I think it's all right if anybody whoever wants to ask a question, just unmute yourself and go ahead. Any takers?
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say I enjoyed that immensely. I really don't know much about the subject matter, and it just looks so intriguing. And I just loved your presentation, and I just would like to hear more. You're a marvelous teacher and very talented, and the way you presented the material was wonderful. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you very much. You know, I think to be a poet, one really writes for themselves. I worked for New York State poets in the schools for many, many years, and then independently did workshops with a music specialist talking about integrating the arts into school curriculum. And I think the gratification comes in writing the poem, but the fullness of it. One famous poet said, to be a poem must be shared. So I kind of believe that, and being able to share with you tonight was really very meaningful to me. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad I tuned in, really. I was back and forth and said, oh, I don't want to forget. And then I was so happy that I just made it in time and I enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And please come again.
Thank you. Well, if Jessica invites me back, I'll be back.
Okay.
I have another book coming out in 2022. It's not mythology, but I would love to be able to share that with you as well. And I would just like quickly to say that if you do like the book, I believe you can find it at the Hickory Stick in town.
Okay, all right, that's one. Actually, I live in Oxford, and I saw the article advertising your talk in The Voices, which is our local paper. So I had that on the fridge, and yes, so thank you. And I will find.
Well, you can find it on Amazon, and
sure, sure,
it's available. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Good night now.
Good night.
Anyone else have a question or comment they'd like to share?
If we can see one another, it's easier to have the conversation. Are you able to see them, or because all your names?
Yeah, mostly names, but I think maybe Benita or Natalia has a question.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, this is Bonita.
Hi.
Hi, Bonita.
Hi, thank you for sharing your work. It was really interesting, wonderful, and amazing. Thank you. I was really intrigued by the way you write. I also write, but my work, like you said, you write for yourself. And the way you said you got interested in a subject, you did some research, and then you were inspired to write. For me, it hasn't happened that way. You know, I'm inspired by what's outside of me, what's inside of me, but never like really studied it and then wrote. And I was wondering how that happens, how that happened for you.
Well, quite honestly, most of my poetry, I said this was the fourth book that came out, and it was totally different. And my next book that's coming out, called Dreaming Missouri, is a confessional poetry, and it comes from inside of me, and it's inspired by just living, you know, the stories
Right.
of one's life, the joy, the sorrow, the love, the loss. There's stories about my mother, my father. This, I don't know, it just, when I started reading, I still had that vision of that statue in my head. And it seemed to me there was a story that needed to be told, that these were stories that were, they were signposts that were posted for us, that we should learn not to make these mistakes. And the way I speak is through poetry. I have a website, it's called Poet Lady Katz I talk with people around the world about why they write and what they write. And we all agreed that we often write what we cannot.
Say.
And I didn't quite know how to say this in any other form, but in poetry.
I missed one word. You said we often write when we cannot. What
we cannot say out loud, we put
Yes,
down,
I
we write.
totally agree. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
I
so
really
welcome,
enjoyed-
Benita. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Anyone else? Natalia?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Natalia.
Hi, Anis. So this is my
No, Natalia.
yes, she knows me. That is my beautiful grandmother. I wanted to say thank you for sharing your poetry on here. It's every time I hear it, I learn something new and it inspires me. It's really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing again. And I just wanted to find a question. I feel like I always have something more I can learn from you. And hearing your poems, I was just curious if there were different journeys for writing each one, if there were any particular poem that took you a lot longer, or if there was, one that was really easy to write, just kind of poured through you. I was just kind of curious a little bit about your journey of the difference between each story, because each mythological story is so different, and yet you write the poems so seamlessly, they go so well together. But yeah, I guess if you just have anything to share about the different journeys between each story.
I do think that if there was one poem that came, I think, sort of easy to me, it would have been The Limits of Light, the story of Icarus, for some reason. Some of the poems I struggled with, and I had to put them aside for a while and then go back to them. But each poem found its way to almost a morality at the end. If one has a heart, it's susceptible to breaking. I want the poems to end with something meaningful that we could take away from the story, because, as I said, I kind of felt the stories were messages. They were, don't do this, don't make this mistake, don't make the same mistakes we did. And so, yeah, each poem was written, some of them more easily than others. Some of them I had to struggle with to find that morality to end the poem with. But I could have kept on writing. I mean, at some point you just have to stop and say the book complete. And that's when I decided to write the poem, The Gift, in the beginning, The Gift in the end, because I felt the book needed that context. Where did it all begin, and where is it going to end? With hope, obviously. So yeah, it's a good question, and it makes me think about it. And you're a very talented young lady as well, Natalia. So
I come by it honestly. I get it from my grandma.
I've got the audience rigged here. Thanks for listening.
Beautiful.
Thanks for coming, Natalia, to this tonight.
Thank you, Anis. Thank you for sharing.
They call me Anis. I have no explanation for that, but they call me Anis, the grandkids.
Those are the special names. We like that.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has a last question or comment, then we will close out for tonight. And once again, the book can be found at the Hickory Stick Bookstore or where most books are sold. And the recording of tonight's program will be on our website at gunlibrary.org. So you can share that with your friends. All right. Thank you so much, Susan.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Keep writing, Benita.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm getting ready to do some different things right now.
Good, good. That's what we need
Yeah.
to do.
Work with the musician, actually.
Yes, that's what I did.
With music,
for many years.
with a guy who does music therapy. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that's a new thing. Thank you.
If you go on my website and you connect with me, I would be happy to turn you on to the book that I wrote, because it's all about integrating poetry into music and music into movement. And I'm happy to send you a copy.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're
Good
very
night.
welcome.
Good night.
Beautiful. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.